day 854 of this Trump administration. We've learned two things in just these hours before our airtime here tonight. First, and importantly, Robert Mueller apparently wishes to testify behind closed doors when he goes before the House Judiciary Committee. The chairman, New York Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler, theorized on this network tonight that Mueller wants to avoid a media circus of live coverage. Much more on this in the minutes to come. Second, Donald Trump tonight announced that he has ordered the nation's intelligence agencies to fully cooperate with the Attorney General's investigation into the origins of the Mueller inquiry. Again, more on both of these stories in a moment. First, this day we have just witnessed the direct attacks the president and Speaker of the House are engaging in against each other out in the open. Trump got off to an early start on social media this morning. There it is, accusing Democrats of seeking a, quote, redo of the Mueller report and of being the do-nothing party. He also wrote that he was, quote, extremely calm yesterday with my meeting with Pelosi and Schumer, knowing they would say I was raging. What Trump did and said yesterday at the White House was one of the main points of contention between the speaker and the president.
The president, again, stormed out. I think, first pound the table, walk out the door. I think what really got to him was these court cases and the fact that the House Democratic Caucus is not on a path to impeachment. And that's where he wants us to be.
She said I walked into the room right next door yesterday and walked in and started screaming and yelling, just the opposite. I walked into the cabinet room. You had the group, Crying Chuck, Crazy Nancy. I tell you what, I've been watching her, and I have been watching her for a long period of time. She's not the same person. She's lost it.
So then Trump did this. He put his senior aides on the spot. So one by one, they had to come forward to say how calm he was yesterday.
Kellyanne, what was my temperament yesterday?
Very calm, no temper tantrum. Mr. President, why would you have to raise your voice?
You were very calm and you were very direct.
What was my attitude yesterday at the meeting?
Mercy's right. Kellyanne's right. You were very calm.
What was my tone yesterday at the meeting?
Very calm. I've seen both, and this was definitely not angry or ranting. Very calm and straightforward.
Good. So it's decided. Pelosi has been dealing with her discordant Democratic caucus, steering her fellow party members away from the idea of impeachment right now, urging them to continue their investigations, which have rankled the president. Here's what they had to say on those topics.
The White House is just crying out for impeachment. That's why he flipped yesterday. The president's behavior in terms of his obstruction of justice, the things that he is doing, it's very clear. It's in plain sight. It cannot be denied. Ignoring subpoenas, obstruction of justice. Yes, these could be impeachable offenses.
The whole Democrat Party is very messed up. They have never recovered from the great election of 2016, an election that I think you folks liked very much, right? Well, Nancy Pelosi was not happy about it, and she is a mess. We went through 2 years of Bob Mueller, with 18 people that hated Donald Trump. Now, all of a sudden, we continue to go down this path. I don't think people are going to stand for it.
The swipes became even more personal as each questioned the other's temperament and fitness to lead.
I pray for the President of the United States. I wish that his family or his administration or his staff would have an intervention for the good of the country. If you don't stop honoring your oath of office, I can't work with you. That's basically what he's saying. Maybe he wants to take a leave of absence. I don't know. I actually ardently pray for the president.
It was sad when I watched Nancy all moving, the movement and the hands and the craziness. And I watched it. That's, by the way, a person that's got some problems.
Then, in the midst of all that, Trump tossed out this.
I'm an extremely stable genius.
The speaker responded quickly, and we quote, "When the extremely stable genius starts acting more presidential, I'll be happy to work with him on infrastructure, trade, and other issues." Then there is what the president did just a few hours ago. Again, the White House press secretary released this statement, and we quote, "Today, at the request and recommendation of the Attorney General of the United States, President Donald J. Trump directed the intelligence community to quickly and fully cooperate with the Attorney General's investigation into surveillance activities during the 2016 presidential election. The Attorney General has also been delegated full and complete authority to declassify information pertaining to this investigation in accordance with the long-established standards for handling classified information." Now, that last part is important because the AG will be bound by existing law, but this is part of that effort to investigate the investigators going back to the time before Mueller. More on this in a moment. And finally, Trump and his people will have to live with this over the long Memorial Day weekend. The New Yorker is on the board with a Barry Blitt caricature cover offering a devastating depiction of the president's supplicants, Graham, Barr, and McConnell. The artwork is entitled The Shining. On that note, we are so happy to welcome tonight's guest to our leadoff discussion on this Thursday evening. All four returning veterans: Kimberly Atkins, senior Washington correspondent for WBUR, Boston's NPR news station; Kelsey Snell, congressional reporter for NPR; Robert Costa, national political reporter for The Washington Post, moderator of Washington Week on PBS; and Jeremy Bash, former chief of staff at CIA and Pentagon, former chief counsel for the House Intel Committee. Let's go back a little bit further. If you're old enough to remember earlier today, let's talk about that. How are Trump loyal forces thinking about their guy's performance today?
They know he's in a tough spot as this all plays out. But many Trump allies I'm talking to tonight just got off the phone with Rudy Giuliani, president's lawyer, Mark Meadows, his top ally in the House of Representatives. They're trying to swing the spotlight away from these dramas with Speaker Pelosi and bring it back to the origins of the Russia probe. This has been a months-long effort on the Republican side to try to bring some heat on the Department of Justice. There's always this talk now on the right wing about a so-called coup in their eyes against the Trump administration. This effort, this language, it's only escalating tonight. And it comes amid these tensions with Congress where you have the Speaker of the House and the President of the United States, in essence, walking away from infrastructure talks and having an all-out war over the possibility of impeachment.
Kelsey, let's remember that the President of the United States today again publicly declared himself a stable genius and then in order trotted out senior White House staff to speak of his calm yesterday. The way Pelosi is handling this, in your time on the Hill, do you think this might be a coalescing moment for her? Because, again, there's been some disparity in that Democratic caucus.
Well, there's certainly been some disparity, but I've had it described to me as a vocal minority of the House Democrats who want to move towards impeachment. And the meeting that Pelosi had yesterday, where she brought all of her members together, actually did seem to tamp down that talk for a little bit. Part of that is because Pelosi is doing this thing where she is more or less trying to talk to a party of two bases. There's the base of her party that is much like her constituents in San Francisco, very progressive, and the other base, the more moderates from across the country that essentially delivered her the majority. And she has a tough line to walk of satisfying both of them. And in large part, that's what she's trying to do when she talks about cover-ups, but also talks about ways to kind of get the information Democrats want without having to go off of the cliff towards impeachment. It's something that's going to be difficult for her for sure, but it's something that she has had to navigate before. She's not new to a difficult constituency of her own party.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.